Hi, sweet friends. I am so excited to kick off a happy golden holiday. As many of you know, I select a new theme every year to take me through the holiday season. And of course, this week is Thanksgiving week, and that will kick off a wonderful season of merriment. For me, I celebrate Advent through the full 12 days of Christmas, which ends on Epiphany, January the 6th. So I get in about 6 weeks of joy, which I just love sharing with all of you. So today we are going to start by reading one of my very favorite chapters from On the Banks of Plum Creek. And throughout the holiday season, I will be sharing favorite Little House Christmas and holiday excerpts. My theme this year is in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Little House on the Prairie, the television show. As many of you have recently discovered, I went along with the cast to several of the different celebrations, and they have much more planned in 2025 to celebrate. We're also going to be talking about a historical element that Caroline Ingalls probably would have used, and we are going to be creating a holiday centerpiece. I love using fresh greens, and this one will have gold candles to incorporate the theme and rustic pioneer touches. I'm also going to share how I am wrapping up my gifts this year, because I do choose a different theme that does carry over into how I wrap each of my gifts. So we're going to do a little gift wrapping as well. Let's get started by reading the chapter Suprise from On the Banks of Plum Creek. That was another mild winter without much snow. It was still grasshopper weather, but chill winds blew, the sky was gray, and the best place for little girls was in the cozy house. Pa was gone outdoors all day. He hauled logs and chopped them into wood for the stove. He followed frozen Plum Creek far upstream where nobody lived, and set traps along the banks for muskrat and otter and mink. Every morning, Laura and Mary studied their books and worked sums on the slate. Every afternoon, Ma heard their lessons. She said they were good little scholars, and she was sure that then when they went to school again, they would find that they kept up with their classes. Every Sunday, they went to Sunday school. Laura saw Nellie Olson showing off her fur cape. She remembered what Nellie had said about Pa, and she burned hot inside. She knew that hot feeling was wicked. She knew she must forgive Nellie, or she would never be an angel. She thought hard about the pictures of beautiful angels in the big paper-covered Bible at home. But they wore long white nightgowns. Not one of them wore a fur cape. One happy Sunday was the Sunday when the Reverend Alden came from eastern Minnesota to preach in this Western church. He preached for a long time while Laura looked at his soft blue eyes and watched his beard wagging. She hoped he would speak to her after church, and he did. "Here are my little country girls, Mary and Laura," he said. He remembered their names. Laura was wearing her new dress that day. The skirt was long enough, and the sleeves were long too. They made her coat sleeves look shorter than ever, but the red braid on the cuffs was pretty. "What a pretty new dress, Laura," the Reverend Alden said. Laura almost forgave Nellie Olson that day. Then came Sundays when the Reverend Alden stayed at his own far church, and in Sunday school Nellie Olson turned up her nose at Laura and flounced her shoulders under the fur cape. Hot wickedness boiled up in Laura again. One afternoon, Ma said there would be no lessons because they must all get ready to go to town that night. Laura and Mary were astonished. "But we never go to town at night," Mary said. "There always must be a first time," said Ma. "But why must there be, Ma?" Laura asked. "Why are we going to town at night?" "It's a surprise," said Ma. "Now no more questions. We must all take baths and be our very nicest." In the middle of the week, Ma brought in the wash tub and heated water for Mary's bath, then again for Laura's bath, and again for Carrie's. There had never been such a scrubbing and scampering, such a changing to fresh drawers and petticoats, such brushing of shoes and braiding of hair and tying on of hair ribbons. There had never been such a wondering. Supper was early. After supper, Pa bathed in the bedroom. Laura and Mary put on their new dresses. They knew better than to ask any more questions, but they wondered and whispered together. The wagon box was full of clean hay. Pa put Mary and Laura in it and wrapped blankets around them. He climbed to the seat beside Ma and drove away towards town. The stars were small and frosty in the dark sky. The horses' feet clippity-clopped and the wagon rattled over the hard ground. Pa heard something else. "Whoa," he said, pulling up the reins. Sam and David stopped. There was nothing but vast, dark coldness and stillness, pricked by the stars. Then the stillness blossomed into the loveliest sound. 2 clear notes sounded and sounded again and again. No one moved. Only Sam and David tinkled their bits together and breathed. Those 2 notes went on, loud, full and loud, soft and low. They seemed to be the stars singing. Too soon, Ma murmured. We better be getting on, Charles, and the wagon rattled on. Still through its rattling, Laura could hear those swaying notes. "Oh, Pa, what is it?" she asked, and Pa said, "It's the new church bill, Laura." It was for this that Pa had worn his old patched boots. The town seemed asleep. The stores were dark as Pa drove past them. Then Laura exclaimed, "Oh, look at the church! How pretty the church is!" The church was full of light. Light spilled out of all the windows and ran out into the darkness from the door when it opened to let someone in. Laura almost jumped out from under the blankets before she remembered that she must never stand up in the wagon when the horses were going. Pa drove to the church steps and helped them all out. He told them to go in, but they waited in the cold until he had covered Sam and David with their blankets. Then he came and they all went into the church together. Laura's mouth fell open and her eyes stretched to look at what she saw. She held Mary's eyes tightly and they followed Ma and Pa. They sat down, then Laura could look with all her might. Standing in front of the crowded benches was what Laura decided must be a tree. She could see its trunk and branches, but she had never before seen such a tree. Where leaves would be in summer, there were clusters and streamers of thin gold paper. Thick among them hung little sacks made of pink mosquito bar. Laura was almost sure that she could see candy in them. From the branches hung packages wrapped in colored paper. Red packages and pink packages and yellow packages, all tied with colored string. Silk scarves were draped among them. Red mittens hung by the cord that could go around your neck and keep them from being lost if you were wearing them. A pair of new shoes hung by their heels from a branch. Lavish strings of white popcorn were looped all over this. Under the tree and leaning against it were all kinds of things. Laura saw a crinkly bright washboard, a wooden tub, a churn and dasher, a sled made of new boards, a shovel, and a long-handled pitchfork. Laura was too excited to speak. She squeezed Mary's hand tighter and tighter, and she looked up at Ma, wanting so much to know what that was. Ma smiled down at her and answered, "That is a Christmas tree, girls. Do you think it is pretty?" They could not answer. They nodded while they kept on looking at that wonderful tree. They were hardly even surprised to know that this was Christmas, though they had not expected Christmas yet because there was not enough snow. Just then, Laura saw the most wonderful thing of all. From a far branch of that tree hung a little fur cape and a hand muff to match. The Reverend Alden was there and he preached about Christmas. But Laura was looking at that tree and she could not hear what he said. Everyone stood up to sing and Laura stood up, but she couldn't sing. Not a sound would come out of her throat. In the whole world, there couldn't be a store so wonderful to look at as that tree. After the singing, Mr. Tower and Mr. Beetle began taking things off of it and reading out names. Mrs. Tower and Miss Beetle brought those things down past the benches and gave them to the persons whose name was on them. Everything on that tree was a Christmas present for somebody. When Laura knew that, the lamps and the people and the voices and even the tree began to whirl. They whirled faster and noisier and more excited. Someone gave her a pink mosquito bar bag. It did have candy in it and a big popcorn ball. Mary had one too, and so did Carrie. Every girl and boy had one. Then Mary had a pair of blue mittens, and Laura had a pair of a red pair. Ma opened a big package, and there was a warm, big brown and red plaid shawl for her. And Pa got a woolly muffler. Then Carrie had a rag doll with a china head, and she screamed for joy. Through the laughing and talking and rustling of papers, Mr. Beetle and Mr. Tower went on shouting names. The little fur cape and muff still hung on the tree, and Laura wanted them. She wanted to look at them as long as she could. She wanted to look at them as long, and she wanted to know who got them. They could not be for Nellie Olson, who already had a fur cape. Laura did not expect anything more, but to Mary came a pretty little booklet with Bible pictures in it from Mrs. Tower. Mr. Tower was taking the little fur cape and the muff from the tree. He read a name, but Laura could not hear it through all the joyful noise. She lost sight of the cape and the muff among all the people. They were gone now. Then to Carrie came a cunning little brown, spotted white china dog. But Carrie's arms and her eyes were full of her doll. So Laura held and stroked and laughed over the sleek little dog. "Merry Christmas, Laura," Miss Beetle said, and in Laura's hand she put a beautiful little box. It was made of snow-white gleaming china. On its top stood a wee gold-colored teapot and a gold-colored tiny cup in a gold-colored saucer. And the top of the box lifted off. Inside was a nice place to keep a breastpin if someday Laura had a breastpin. Ma said it was a jewel box. There had never been such a Christmas as this. It was such a large, rich Christmas. The whole church full of Christmas. There were so many lamps, so many people, so much noise and laughter, and so many happinesses in it. Laura felt full and bursting, as if that whole big, rich Christmas were inside her. And her mittens and her beautiful jewel box with the wee gold cup and saucer and teapot and her candy and her popcorn ball. And suddenly someone said, "These are for you, Laura." Miss Towers stood smiling, holding out the little fur cape and muff. "For me?" Laura said. "For me?" Then everything else vanished, while with both arms she hugged the furs to her. She hugged them tighter and tighter, trying to believe they were really hers, that silky soft little brown fur cape and the muff. All around her Christmas went on, but Laura knew only the softness of their furs. People were going home. Carrie was standing on the bench while Ma fastened her coat and tied her hood more snugly. Ma was saying, "Thank you so much for the shawl, Brother Alden. It is just what I needed." Pa said, "And I thank you for the muffler. It will feel good when I come to town in the cold." The Reverend Alden sat down on the bench and asked, "And does Mary's coat fit?" Laura had not noticed Mary's coat until then. Mary had on a new dark blue coat. It was long and its sleeves came down to Mary's wrists. Mary buttoned it up and it fitted. "And how does this little girl like her furs?" The Reverend Alden smiled. He drew Laura between his knees and he laid the fur cape around her shoulders and fastened it at the throat. He put the cord of the muff around her neck and in her hand went inside the silky muff. "There," the Reverend Alden said, "now my little country girls will be warm when they come to Sunday school." "What do you say, Laura?" Ma asked, but the Reverend Alden said, "There is no need. The way her eyes are shining is enough." Laura could not speak. The golden brown fur cuddled her neck and softly hugged her shoulders. Down her front it hid the threadbare fastenings of her coat. The muff came up far up her wrists and hid the shortness of her coat sleeves. "She's a little brown bird with red trimmings," the Reverend Alden said. Then Laura laughed. It was true. Her hair, her coat, her dress, and the wonderful furs were brown. Her hood and the mittens and the braid on her dress were red. "I'll tell my church people back east about our little brown birds," said the Reverend Alden. "You see, when I told them about our church out here, they said they must send a box for the Christmas tree. They all gave things they had. The little girls who sent your furs and Mary's coat needed larger ones." "Thank you, sir," said Laura. "And please, sir, tell them thank you too." For when she could speak, her manners were as nice as Mary's. Then they all said good night and Merry Christmas to the Reverend Alden. Mary was so beautiful in her Christmas coat. Carrie was so pretty on Pa's arm. Pa and Ma were smiling so happily. And Laura was all gladness. Mr. and Mrs. Olson were going home too. Mr. Olson's arms were full of things, and so were Nellie's and Willie's. No wickedness boiled up in Laura now. She only felt a little bit of mean gladness. "Merry Christmas, Nellie," Laura said. Nellie stared while Laura walked quietly on with her hands snuggled deep in the soft muff. Her cape was prettier than Nellie's, and Nellie had no muff. I just love that story. You know, it's, as a child, the holidays, I can remember just wanting something so special and thinking that it isn't possible. And, you know, in thinking about that chapter, it talks about the new church bell and how even today, you know, Pa's church bell that he forego buying new boots for so he could give to the fundraising. That's so special. And you know, in my family, giving was emphasized during Christmas. Our family always celebrated Christmas. Your family might celebrate Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, and in both of those, you know, it's the focus, I think, is not on the receiving, but the giving. And you know, even Laura's little white jewel box, that's still in existence, and you can see that at the museum in Mansfield, Missouri. And so, you know, every year, as many of you know, some of you have followed me since 2008, when I first started my website, Decor to Adore. And every holiday season, I change my theme, and every holiday season, I come up with something that is a fundraiser. And each year the fundraiser changes. In the past, I've done the Red Cross, Samaritan's Purse, Wreaths Across America, the Humane Society, among many others. And this year, when I went to Mansfield, Missouri in September for their Wilder Days Festival, I learned about a need that accompanies the Rock House. Now, if you're not familiar with the Rock House was lived in by Laura Ingalls Wilder and her husband Almanzo. It was a gift from their daughter Rose. And at that time, during the turn of the century, you could purchase house plans from the Sears catalog and, you know, build houses to the specifications. And at that time, that house offered the most modern of conveniences. And Rose, who was one of the highest paid journalists of her day, that was her gift to her parents one year. And that house is where Laura penned the Little House book series. So these books that we love, that's where Laura wrote the books. And if you go to visit, the house is open for about 6 months of the year, I believe. It shuts down during the winter because of the weather. There's a beautiful picture window, and Laura had placed her desk in front of it, and the view is absolutely magnificent. And the Rock House is now 96 years old, and it has its original roof on it. So this year I would like to be able to send something to help repair the roof. And there's also the Surveyor's House in DeSmet, South Dakota. And if you ever read the book On the Shores, By the Shores of Silver Lake, Laura and her family lived in the Surveyor's House that winter. And so those are what I would like to fundraise for. And so how do I do that? Well, every year I create something for my shop, or I have something in my Etsy shop. In past years, I've handcrafted ornaments, I've done jewelry, all gifts that you can purchase, just as you normally would during this season of gift giving. And the profits go to supporting these worthwhile causes. So earlier this week on Facebook Marketplace, I had talked about these Hussifs. Now, what is a Hussif? A Hussif is also known as a housewife, and these have been carried for centuries by both men and women. And I have some simpler designs in my Etsy shop, and you unfold them, and gift cards can be stuck in here, snacks. Some people use it as for jewelry. You can pin brooches, tuck your earrings. At one of the Little House events where I had these displayed, a little boy had sweetly said, "Mama, it's a place to stick my Hot Wheel cars." I just loved that. So, it's however you want to use it. But these are a little bit more special. They're perfect for the holidays. You can see that on the ribbon, it's measuring tape. And beautiful damask fabric. And then on the inside, silk and velvet has been used. And it actually does come with, I'll go through, so on the top is a vintage thimble. And there's another little pocket to stick some things. And in this pocket is some snips. And this is a needle and pin holder. And this is wool. It's real wool. And the reason why our ancestors would do that is sheep's wool has a substance called lanolin. And you've probably heard of that term. We often use it in lotions. But the lanolin in wool, if you keep your pins in wool scraps, it keeps them from rusting. And then over here is a little pillow. You see how that's elevated? And it's filled with a special type of sand that when you get your needle ready, that motion of putting it in the pillow sharpens the tip of your needles. And that design and that technique, again, these have been used for hundreds of years. And then there's a bigger pocket that holds thread. Now, traditionally, we did not have colored threads like we do today. Carolyn Ingalls probably had a light thread and a dark thread, so a white and a black, and that's on a vintage spool. My dear friend D'Artagnan, we've known each other for about 8 years, and she is my sewing mentor. I first met her at the Time Travelers Sewing Guild. It was a group of ladies who got together to help one another sew and learn how to create historical garments. For those of you who saw the Little House 50th anniversary costume collection, a lot of the thanks has to be given to D'Artagnan, who helped teach me historical sewing methods. And so on the bottom here is a little piece of lace, and a vintage bone bodkin is slid in through there. And these were used to lace up garments. And so D'Artagnan had found a bunch of these bodkins and the thimbles and the old wooden thread spools at an antique store in Indiana when she was there earlier. And she has just been an amazing source of knowledge and support for me I just can't thank her enough. And she grew up, she's a Little House fan. her family grew up with the books. And so these special little cases, it's just a limited number of them. All of the profits will go to either charity that I mentioned of your choice when you're checking out of the Etsy shop, which I will place the link down below in the description box. You can tell me in the comment box when you're checking out which you would like to support. Now, what if you're not a seamstress? Okay, this is absolutely can still work as a jewelry case. You know, you have your pocket where you can put your watch or your bracelets, and here you, instead of needles, you can pin a brooch or earrings, and again pin a brooch here. You can slide, you know, a small brooch here and another little holder here. Absolutely a very fancy dancy snack holder as well. So I just wanted to talk about that because giving is so important. And now that we have read our story and talked about a season of giving, I think it's time for a craft. So let's head into the kitchen and create a holiday centerpiece. This is the centerpiece that I'm going to use in my formal dining area during Advent season. I will light a candle for the next 4 weeks, and when you are creating a live greenery centerpiece, you'll want to start with a container that is either waterproof or you create a barrier. So for instance, in this wood crate, which of course is not waterproof, I just repurposed these vintage spice jars into mini vases and nestled them among the candles, and it works real well. Now this, well, it's almost an antique bump pan, is actually waterproof, and you can kind of see the water in there. And in it, I have fully saturated Floral Oasis, and this is what wet Floral Oasis looks like. It comes in blocks, and it will say on the package either dry Floral Oasis, that's kind of a hard word to say, or wet Floral Oasis. And the wet is what you use for real flowers and greenery, and of course the dry is for silk and faux greenery. And so I just went around into my yard, and I have 2 different plates. So I went around and cut some greenery, and I have some simple snips, so you can kind of bend it a little bit, and you just start by adding in the greenery. And on the bottom is when, if you have kind of a piece of greenery that's not as pretty, go ahead and stick that into the bottom. You're just going to keep layering. So I kind of just keep spinning. If you have a turntable, a lot of people, florists, when they're making a centerpiece, they will put the container on a turntable, because you're just going to keep spinning and adding things to the Floral Oasis. Now, when I cut my branches, I normally put them either in the sink or a big bucket and fill it up with water, and I let it sit overnight so they get thoroughly saturated, a really nice, good drink. And then once you have your base, then you can start topping it with some of the prettier branches, the smaller branches. For years and years, I lived in Phoenix, so I did not have the luxury of going into my neighborhood and getting nice little pieces of greenery. So what I did, and you can too, is if you go in the later afternoons to Christmas tree lots when they've been removing the bottom branches after someone purchased it, they have stacks and stacks of these branches that they just toss, and they will be happy for you to take them away. And I was never charged when I went and to a lot and asked for their branches. Now I did a basic pine base, and now I'm gonna start adding in some cedar. It's just a slightly different color and texture, and oh my goodness, it smells so good. So again, I'm just gonna kind of go around in a circle, tucking that in, and you know, kind of spinning it around to see. And one thing right now is, in a day or two, these branches will kind of start to soften and drape over. Right now they're really perky, but they'll calm down. And then I love juniper. It has these little tiny, they almost look like blueberries, and I like to tuck those in a little bit, again, for just some different texture and color, and just, you know, just keep adding. And then once you have a lot of your greenery, and I'll add my single candle once I get this on my table, you can think about adding a little bit of color, and you can do that through adding some little jingle bells if you have more of a rustic theme, nice little mini ornaments in different colors. You can add in ribbon loops. Now my theme this year is a happy golden Christmas. So I had these wooden stars that I then added some beautiful glitter to, and they're all sort of different sizes, and it's just a nice simple decoration for the season. And then my holly bush is really putting on a show, so I'm gonna add in just a little bit of holly. Just again, it just adds that little bit of color and texture. And I'm not going to share my kitchen tablescape in this video, but you will see it in the future. And you know, I think we're about done. So you'll see this finished container on its tablescape in I'm not sure if it's going to be next week's video, where I am showing some of my living room and dining room decorated for Christmas. This is going to go in my kitchen, so that might be the third week, but you'll definitely see this all lit up in this video. Now, did you notice behind me these cute little stockings? You're never gonna believe how I made these so simple. So I'm gonna clear this away and set up a new craft for us to do this quick and easy stocking craft. For the past few Christmases, I have been trying to really make an effort to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Reusing ribbon, reusing gift bags, tissue, so that less waste goes into the landfill. Now, when I go to the grocery store, a good portion of the time I have made my own cloth shopping bags that I use, but occasionally I forget them, or I buy more groceries than what my cloth bags will hold. So then I always ask for your typical brown paper shopping bag. And so what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove the very bottom of the bag, okay? And then one thing that you'll notice is the bag, the handles don't always line up. So you'll just want to pay attention that your handles are lined up, and then you'll just draw a stocking shape. I freehanded it. You can trace an existing stocking that you may have. You can also go to Google and type in stocking template, print it out, and use that as a pattern. So once you do that, you'll cut it out, and so you'll end up with two sides of your paper bag. And I just hold it in place with these little clips. These work so well because I wouldn't be able to use pins. And so from here, you can attach your stocking pieces together one of two ways. Now, since I sew, I have opted to use my sewing machine, and I do this at the very end of a sewing project when I'm getting ready to change out my needle, and I'm basically going to throw it away because it's dull. So that is a perfect time to sew up these stockings because it doesn't have to be as sharp as when you're sewing through fabric. And so you can see on this one that I just did a simple zigzag stitch, and this one had a straight stitch. This is a little pretty floral stitch. Now, if you don't have a sewing machine, you can absolutely take in between the two layers, run along the edges a bead of hot glue. And if this is a craft that you're doing with children, you can also use craft glue. Now that, of course, does take a bit longer to dry. About an hour is if you're doing that with children. So you may want to have a few stockings already made that they can then decorate while the glue is drying. So then, how do you decorate? So once you've cut and sewn, you can leave a straight edge, but you can also use fun scissors if you want to trim your edges, like a Dole paper set of pinking shears. Do not use sewing scissors. That will land you in jail. So you can do different things on the edges. And then for this one, if you can see, and I'll do a close-up of these in a bit, this was made with a white jelly pin. I just went in and free-handed some snowflakes and little curves. And then on this one, I just took some simple craft glue and I put a thin layer of craft glue, and then I took a toothpick and kind of just dotted glue all over and shook some glitter on it, shook off the excess, let it dry for about an hour. Another great thing if you're doing this project with little kids, I'm sure you've seen the handprint trees, so you could have little handprint trees on your stockings. You can use markers and of course crayons. So you can absolutely have the stocking ready to go if you're having a group of children coming over that you need to entertain. And then they can just decorate it in a variety of ways. You could even glue on some sequins or add holiday stickers. The sky is the limit. It's just a fun, easy craft. And you know, for me, because I already had these jelly pins and the scissors and the scrap ribbon, this was a no-cost project for me. And so I'm gonna make about 5 or 6 of them. I think it'll be really cute. We're going to a couple of holiday parties, so to get some sparkling cider or maybe some glühwein and stick it down in there, it makes a really cute gift bag too. So I hope you have enjoyed this holiday episode. It is the first video in a series of 3 that I have planned. So next week we will be taking a tour of my living room and formal dining room, all decorated for Christmas. I'm excited to share my Happy Golden Christmas theme with you, and we will probably be doing another reading. Let me know if you have a favorite Christmas story that you would like me to read, and I'll also be sharing this year's limited edition Christmas ornament that I made. So thank you so much for joining me. As always, I appreciate a thumbs up, and that little emblem is right down below. In the corner, you can see a little box that says subscribe. So if you'd like to be notified when future videos are uploaded, go ahead and click on that. Thank you so much for joining me.